Good morning. Today we're going to talk from our experiences of many years of practicing A Course in Miracles and defense mechanisms, the way that the ego will defend against you having the experience that the Course is pointing towards. And in our community we have come across so many resistances and obstacles that we actually have almost developed a little bit of a lingo, like that happens in professions over many years. And some of you may know the defense mechanism by other names. One could be called intellectualizing, which could apply basically to personal development or even spiritual growth. When you start to read books, even A Course in Miracles, and you start to find yourself being able to talk the talk, but having very little success of walking the walk. And I have experienced, as I've gone around the world to 40-some countries, that generally people are so terrified of A Course in Miracles that they just come together in study groups, because it's almost like they huddle together like, oh my God, I can't stand to do this on my own because I might freak out. Who knows, Jesus might appear and then I'd really freak out, but there's a fear. It's like such a direct pathway to God that there's a huge fear around it. And so that's one sense study groups serve kind of like a way, like, okay, it's this extraordinary book, but we've got each other, we can at least talk about what we're feeling, what we're struggling with, and many groups struggle very intensely with the book. In fact, I've gone to other cultures, like I was off in rural Argentina one time, and I was with a group of women that were studying the Course, and they came to me and they said, is this difficult everywhere in the world? Like, we are struggling immensely with this book. We are having enormous resistances to it. Is it like that? They didn't know what's happening around the world. I said, oh yeah, it's the same everywhere. It's direct. It's like getting your whiskey straight instead of on the rocks. This is a straight shot. Sometimes people would say like tequila or vodka even. It's really strong. And so one of the ways that the ego will defend against the light and the love of the Course is to intellectualize it, and that shouldn't be surprising, because the Course itself, Helen Schuckman, the scribe, after she'd spent 7 years scribing it, basically said, at last, a pathway to God for intellectuals. So, because of its sometimes 3 and 4 syllable words, its vocabulary, because of its double negatives, because of it, you could go on and on about the way the Course is written. It's, and I'd say more than that, because many people have been raised in Judeo-Christian culture, even if they didn't go to church, they were affected by Judeo-Christian culture, that they have huge reactions to the words. And depending on the location in the world, like in Europe, where they had the Crusades, killing Muslims in the name of Jesus, that's such a distortion of the teachings of Jesus that people burn out on the church, and they burn out on any words that resemble Christian words. The Spanish Inquisition, you could start to go just through the history of Europe and you see that the misuse of Christian symbols by the ego has turned people off. They're more into science or non-duality. And a lot of times people will get into study groups and they're so terrified at actually practicing the Course or putting it into practice that they will study it sometimes for years or many years. I've been to some study groups that are 15 years, 20 years, over 20 years old. They're still going around studying the book. after 20 years, reading a paragraph at a time. They get stuck in the ritual because they're terrified of where the Course is pointing. And in our community, basically, the term that we use is metaphysical ghosting, is using the metaphysics of A Course in Miracles to not feel the darkness, the emotions. Glossing over the emotions, glossing over the fear that's coming up, glossing over the pain and the hurt that's coming up with some metaphysical line from the Course, or I'll say a metaphysical cliche like, oh, the world's an illusion anyway, or it's all just an illusion. When somebody's in a group and they just start to get in touch with some kind of really deep hurt and pain, and somebody else in the group says, it's just an illusion, and then it gets cut off. And so we have come to call that metaphysical ghosting, using the metaphysics to not get in touch with the feelings. And some of you did the labyrinth, where you can see the levels that Jesus gave me, that the outer ring of the labyrinth is the perceptual world. And then the emotions are right underneath the perceptual world. And if you need to go all the way into the center of the labyrinth, and you cut off going to the second ring before you get down to those thoughts and beliefs and desire, then you effectively have blocked yourself from going inward and healing. Therefore, we've talked about that. You need to emote, you need to cry, you need to scream and shout. When I first was doing the Course, Jesus basically sent me off to hermitages where I could scream and shout and rage and do everything, because it was like an explosion of emotions wanting to come up. I also had a relationship when I was in grad school, and between the Course, and I was very shy up to that point, so it was my first relationship and the Course landing at the same time, and my emotions were coming up like a volcanic eruption, like lava spewing up. And I thought, I am not going to be able to handle graduate school, a relationship, and A Course in Miracles at the same time. I would look around at people and say, even the ones who aren't doing the Course, how do they handle grad school and relationships? I couldn't even fathom, because there was too much emotion. I was overwhelmed with emotion. It was an explosion of emotion. And so what we have discovered is that, you can't skip over. You have to actually welcome the emotions, and they can be so intense that that's where you get into a prayer life and a spaciousness, and also being very prayerful about who you're with. Before the Course came, me getting in touch with my emotions, it was such a huge step in my awakening that Jesus used my dog Chipper. There wasn't even a human being, I think, that could have come in at that point. Because I was just blubbering all the time. I was crying constantly. And Chipper was there wagging the tail and licking away. And this went on for hours and hours and hours. So I don't think there was a human being that could have... If I had a girlfriend at the time, she would have surely dumped me. Got a crybaby here. Hopeless, emotional, years of repression. Now he's opening up, and let's let him be. And so basically what we really work with is a huge amount of allowance for the emotions, because until you allow those emotions to come up freely, that you don't get in touch with the emotions, and you aren't capable of getting in touch with what's underneath those emotions until you're in touch with the emotions. It's something that cannot be glossed over. There is no shortcut, there is no substitution. If you're out of touch with your emotions, then I would basically say, if you're out of touch with your emotions, then you're twice removed from reality. And the people that I've met that in this world are called the basket cases, the people I go to 12-step meetings and meet people who are rock bottoming out after years of addiction, and they're all over the place, and they're emotional, and they're crying, and they're pouring their hearts out and everything, they are once removed from reality. And the corporate ones that are so successful, they dress in the power suits, they drive the Mercedes, they live in the big condos, the big houses, they have the huge staffs, and on and on and on, twice removed from reality. They're the successful ones in this world, but remember, everything in this world is backwards and upside down. So it's like the Paul Simon song, believe you're gliding down the highway in the Mercedes when in fact you're slip sliding away. You've been had by the ego. When you are successful in this world, you've been had. You've bought it, hook, line, and sinker. And you think you've got it better than everybody else on the planet. And more than that, you've worked hard for it. And you deserve it. And then when the death of a loved one, a sickness strikes, a heart attack, or whatever, and it's just shattering. How can I, Mr. or Mrs. Successful, have a heart attack? How can my father or mother die? It's like a devastating fall. It's like Humpty Dumpty. You have a huge crash from thinking you're successful to being unable to emotionally cope with something that happens. It just shows you that's that. So that's why we're going to talk today about the metaphysical ghosting.
Yeah. Actually, this morning I had a little chat with Sanjeev, and he was saying that the first time after he met David, he learned the difference between spirituality and a spirit-led life. And I really like that description, because spirituality is a word, and the ego can identify that with certain form. And this is spiritual if the form looks like that, if your life is like that, if you are like that, if you never upset again, it's somehow there is a meaning given to it, whatever that meaning can be, and it becomes an effort to strive to achieve a standard. And it's the same ego trick with anything in this world. Set up a concept, then trying to put some effort in to achieve a standard. Then we can have something to judge. Whether it's good or it's bad, is it progressing, you're advanced or you're not so advanced, how to compare you with other people, then we that's how ego try to find itself, through comparison, through matching it to a standard. And the spirituality can be used by the ego in that way as well. But a spirit-led life, when he was saying it, it was a huge amount of allowance, because there is no standard. You follow the spirit and everything is allowed. And that is the permission and the freedom that he started to sense. And I really feel that is the same even along this seeming path to achieve that kind of total integration with the spirit. There isn't really a standard, because I know for myself, I started A Course in Miracles by myself first, then I had a study group. I was facilitating the group for a couple of years. Like David said, most of the people we talk about, in the end, after some talk about frustration and problem, the conclusion we close that expression with, we're all one anyways. That's the kind of way we finish that off, and because it's metaphysically correct, and because that feels resonating in some way, but it wasn't a living experience. We need still to remind ourselves in some way. But in our life now, living A Course in Miracles 24/7, when we come together, you never hear anyone say, we're all one. You never hear anyone say this world is an illusion. You never really even hear people say, it's your mind. Because if that is known as the truth, then you wouldn't have these problems. The only reason we still feel triggered by by something is because we forget all of those truths in that moment. And we need a gateway to get back to that realization that is hidden from within. So the mechanism that we really use is to allow this something that we somehow believe more than the truth, or we value more than the truth in that moment, that blocks our awareness, to come back to the light, to be fully expressed. And we don't need anything to say, well, no, I give you a truth to affirm in your mind, as if that can heal anything. So I actually just recently read this saying when I was in China. There's a very famous mystic who's basically said, if you don't live it or you don't walk it, then you don't know it. So you don't need to say, I know blah 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 blah, but I can't live it or I can't walk it, because if you don't, you actually don't know.
I know, but
I know
the world's an illusion.
Exactly.
But how many times?
Yeah. So that saves a lot of our talk. We just like, okay, let me start looking at what I still cannot walk my walk, and then that means I don't know that yet. Whatever Jesus says, I don't know. I don't know that we're all one. I don't know that time is illusion. I don't know that this world is illusion. Let's start there and be honest. And there is also, I noticed, an impatience along this path, because the ego wants to fantasize an end result in form and saying, are you there yet? Constantly saying, are you there yet? How far am I along? I'm still having stuff coming up. Oh, how bad. I'm still not happy all the time. I remember this one friend in our community who basically told me a few years ago, he said he was someone who just want to go through this in the fastest way possible and just to get there. And one day he talked with David, and David said, well, this is a lifelong journey. And he just relaxed, and he said, I'm so glad to hear that. This is a lifelong journey. I can give myself permission to be as slow as needed, as patient as needed. When he first told me, I thought, I don't like that at all. Lifelong? Really? It takes a life to walk through all the darkness. Well, I want to get it walked through as fast as possible. So it's like we are living together to keep reminding each other the same thing, But over the years, I started to, because this is a very humbling journey. If we don't keep that kind of humbleness to tell the Spirit, actually, I don't really know what the purpose is. I don't really know how to look at this. I don't really know what I'm here to do. With this kind of humbleness, then we are really not progressing. Because the egos just want to tell us, yeah, you are this or you're that, as a concept. And the same friend, I remember he's in Mexico, and we had a psychic who lived in our community for a very brief period of time, and she's giving readings for people who sometimes come visit our community. And she one day met this friend, and she said, oh, I can see so much happening for you. I can give you a reading. And my friend said, I don't want to know. She's like, what? Don't you want to know what's to come for you? Don't you want to know your future? He said, no, I just want to be happy now. That was, that is the integration of the desire. That's not affirmation when stuff coming up. It is the integration of every single day. This is the desire of be happy now. And it's okay if you fall off. Be glad that you can see what is still tempting in the mind. Because we do need to see this. We do. There is no way we can heal any of this if we don't allow them to be seen first. So this is our, little encouragement to you. Don't look at the future. Don't keep this fantasized picture that constructed by the ego to tell you. Don't be convinced that this is the end result. The end result is right here, right now. And if you can remember to allow the Spirit to lead you in this moment and be happy, this is beautiful. If somehow you forget, then there is some grievance coming up, then pay attention to that and be grateful for that. Because that is what matters in this moment. That this is all there is in this moment.
I think what we would like to do also is put this spiritual journey in some kind of context. Because a lot of you, even though you may have A Course in Miracles or may have other pathways, there are many pathways to God, and the Course is just one form of the universal curriculum, so it's not the only way, it's just one of many. But occasionally we come across witnesses and symbols that are just helpful and that they start to shed a context on things. How many in here have ever heard of Vipassana? One time, a while back, Francis found an article on Facebook that was written by a Vipassana master. Someone who had been with Vipassana from the very beginning in Burma, where it originated, and what the article was, she sent it to me, I read it, is that the Vipassana masters, they do Vipassana retreats all over the world. I've heard many, many comments about them, a lot of them how helpful it's been, how effective it's been, how it was a discipline to go into it, something they didn't really expect, and it helped them get in touch with a lot of stuff. So I've heard a lot of positive feedback. But this was an article by a Vipassana master basically saying that annually the Vipassana masters meet and join together back in Burma. They go back to that part of the world and they meet to discuss how things are going in their practices, in the Vipassana master practices. So it's a meeting of the masters back in Burma. And basically what the article was saying is year after year after year they meet and they say, how's it going? And what they each tell each other is, whoa, we've hit something in our mind, like a shelf of darkness. We've gone down, down, down through our Vipassana meditation, and then we hit a wall of fear. And this is what they exchange. When the masters come together, what do the masters talk about? They talk about the wall of fear that they've hit. So I thought, wow, this is great. When the Vipassana masters have hit the wall, then what do? Well, they go, well, our practice has been extremely helpful, but we need more help because obviously we've hit a wall here. So they began starting to look into psychological practices. They said, we've been using meditation, but we need to just open our minds up because we've hit a wall of fear. And to me, I enjoyed reading that because I thought, yeah, that's how deep this Course goes. This Course is coming from the one who's in charge of the plan of atonement. This Course is coming from the one who's pierced the veil and pierced that wall. And that's why I say it's getting your whiskey straight up. You're getting this Course from one who's healed the sick and raised the dead. That's as deep as it goes. And so when you get into working with the Course and you find you have all kinds of emotions and resistances coming up, just remember what you're working with. You're working with a manual that's been given, an instruction manual from the Master who's pierced the veil of time and space, who's healed the sick and raised the dead, who you're getting a manual from eternity delivered to your eyes to read, to you to practice. And when you keep it in a context, then it shouldn't be surprising that resistances arise. It shouldn't be surprising that emotions come up. And it shouldn't be surprising that this can go on for years or for a lifetime. It's not like you're getting into it and... I've had people who have said to me about some of the early workbook lessons, they said, it gets better than this, right? This is like, these early lessons, like, these are just like preliminary, like preschool stuff, right? Because they read it and they go, is he serious? Like, starts off with lesson number 1, nothing I see means anything, and people are like, is this serious? Is this really a serious, actual, or is this just some kind of a joke? But this is so profound that I said, no, actually, if you can get the first lesson completely, you don't need the rest of the 364. It's not progressive. You can get any lesson completely, you don't even need the rest. They're so profound. They're so deep. And that's important to keep in mind as you're working with this. It's always fun when I meet somebody around the world and I just mention the Course in Miracles and they say, oh yeah, I took that course. Well, you did. How'd it go? Oh, I finished it. Okay. And then they'll say, well, there's so many other, they obviously just took a few bites and went, okay. It didn't bother to chew, just spit it out. But when you get this context of how deep it is, you have a sense of respect and reverence for it. And also with that, you have to come to a sense of starting to see that I need to be gentle with myself. And if I start getting really self-critical and judging myself and judging every move that I make, and am I doing the workbook lessons right, and did I blow it? I've met many people who reach a certain point and they just conclude, I blew it. They just are on a particular lesson and they said, I blew it. And then they say, I think I should get back to it. Do I have to start over at number 1? I said, no, you can go just resume. But there's a lot of criticism, a lot of self-criticism that goes on, a lot of perfectionism that comes in and trying to work with the workbook lessons. And all of that is the ego trying to sabotage the direction of the movement of your mind. It's trying to just throw you off the trail. It's trying to have you draw a conclusion and just say, well, I wasn't ready or I couldn't handle it. And I will occasionally meet people who, the more they talk to me, I'll get this feeling that they genuinely are not ready, and they will start telling me, well, I'm doing this now and that, and I'm like, wonderful, wonderful. I just love them and encourage them with whatever steps they're taking. Oh, I've put the book down. Okay, all right. It's not. There's not a way to do it. There's not a formula to work with this. It's very deep, and I have heard so many stories of readiness stories that I can tell it's so deep that people need to just come at it kind of when they are ready and willing and the time feels right. And then when they engage in it and there's a readiness, then it does take a persistence, a determination, to overcome that resistance on a daily basis. But there are times when people will just smile and say, not in this lifetime, and I'll just rejoice with them. And I even had students back in the 1990s, and sometimes it would be like a husband and wife. The wife's into the Course, and the husband's into traditional Judaism. And so I go over, and the wife is a student, so she'll say, point out anything. We'll go off for a little one-on-one session, please. Anything you see, let me know. Any nuance, point it out to me. Da-da-da-da-da. And then I go off with the husband. We're sitting on the couch watching the basketball game. We're doing all kinds of things. I'm having just as much fun with the husband who's into traditional Judaism and kosher and all this and this. And then occasionally I'll be off talking with the wife in the kitchen, and he'll be listening, and he'll hear something about time and space, and he's like, oh, that's fascinating. Can I join in? Can I listen? They have to feel the joy, they have to feel the love to start to come toward it, to take the little baby steps toward it. He's not in any position to let go of his Judaism. He has no desire to let go of his Judaism, but he's fascinated. Ooh, I like that idea. When he starts to hear ideas about time and space and time collapse, and ooh, that sounds exciting. And the beautiful thing is when a group of students would get together, they would say, David, you treat the husband and the wife so differently. You're off talking metaphysics and pointing things out with the wife, and then you're going with him and you're just rejoicing, and your whole mannerism changes. You're happy and joyful, but you're not talking about the same kind of things. And I said, yeah, that's how the Spirit is. The Spirit's just going to be loving and gracious with everyone, with the postman, with the lady at the grocery store. You're not going to be going around talking metaphysics usually, unless there's a context for it, where somebody is devoted their life to it and they have those kind of questions, then those will come up. But in most cases, I travel around and I just have so much fun with everyone, and it's this lightness and joy and laughter. But if they followed our conversations, we necessarily are not talking about God or metaphysics at all. It's just a rejoicing. If you're out and you're talking with somebody and you meet somebody in the street and they're going, oh, the sun is out, it's a blue sky, what a beautiful day. You don't say, actually, there is no such thing as a day. And beautiful is objective, it's subjective, and you're not here to try to convince anybody. You're here to rejoice in the love, rejoice in the joy, rejoice in the spirit of love that all of us are, and let the Spirit put the words in your mouth, if there are any words at all. A lot of times I end up just hugging people. Lately I've been on a streak of high-fiving. I'll go around and I'll be in a restaurant or whatever, and I'll be talking with somebody and we'll just go, we're like high-fiving. I just met them. We're high-fiving like we're old buddies for 20 years or whatever, because they feel the love, they feel the joy. We're not talking about those things. It's not given to talk about those things. So that's where you start to get into walking the walk, to really feel it, to practice it. You don't have anything to debate. You don't have anything to argue. I was recently in Frankston, which is just south of Melbourne, and I was with a group of people. Most of them had been at the Course in Miracles conference. And I said, let's watch a movie. And I suggested a movie, and some of them were like, because the movie was called Trumpland. It was a movie about Donald Trump, but it was a Michael Moore movie, it was the most loving movie and the most humorous movie. There was so much laughter in that room. I mean, rolling over laughing. And one of the women said, wow, I have never laughed so hard at a movie. I feel so good. I feel so happy. I am so glad I came. And I have to say that when I first heard the name Trumpland, just the Trump in the name, she was like, what is David doing? What is he doing? Why is he showing this movie after the Course in Miracles conference, and everything? But, they were just howling laughing. They were having so much fun. Remember that? And so that's why I just flow confidently in whatever the Spirit gives me. and show up always with the feeling of joy and love and laughter, and then it's quite contagious. It just flows very easily. But I don't question the guidance. I just kind of have merged with the guidance now, and so it just comes very naturally, just spills out.
Yeah, we just went to Melbourne for the conference, and I remember, because I lived in Sydney for a period of time, and my first time to Melbourne was to represent the University of New South Wales to do a debate with University of Melbourne, and it was so interesting, the experience. We went to Melbourne University, and we prepared so much for the debate beforehand, and we arrived, and the day we were given a topic, and then we formed a strategy and how to go about it. And the topic that was given to us, we were given a side, you're given a side. And the side was a winning side of the topic. We couldn't believe. So the whole team basically was decided that cannot be that simple. We cannot be given a side that is obviously already win. Even if we just tell people this is our side, we already kind of win. So it can't be that simple. So it must be a trick in this topic. So the whole team developed a strategy to not go directly at the points, but go around it. So we lost because that was just actually as simple. If you just tell people what you think, you can win. But we were like, no, it must be so complicated. It can't be that simple. So we lost, and nobody could.
It was a Melbourne ambush, like the Sydney group was being ambushed by something too simple.
We lost after 7 years of consecutive win by apparently the Sydney side, and nobody could believe that we were given a winning side and choose to lose by not going at the direct way. And I was thinking about it. I thought, isn't this funny? Because the solution, because David talked yesterday about studying the successful cases instead of studying the problems. And isn't that what the ego wants us to do, is to analyze the problems again and again and again, and analyze our ego so much that hoping by analyzing the problem we can somehow formalize the solution by ourselves, not accepting a solution that's given because it's too simple. This course is too simple. The answer that was given is too simple, and the complicated mind cannot accept that is the way. It is too tricky. There must be some trick. So what David was just saying just then was actually reminding me of something that we, as going along this path, always thinking, because Jesus actually says in the Course in Miracles, you either project or extend. Ego project and spirit extend. So you always do one of the two. You project the ego guilt and shame onto the screen and blame, or you extend from the perspective of the spirit. Extend. So we talk about this word extension quite a bit. This morning when I was talking with Sanjeev, and he asked, what do you mean by extending? And I thought, yeah, that becomes a lingo that I forget. People, there is a meaning behind it. But what really is extending is not in form, is not in the form of words. Is not to talk or in this kind of sessions. What is really extended, and the only thing that can be extended, is the vision of the Christ. So every time when I see someone, I can choose to extend how I see them by holding it in my mind. That's the only thing that really can be extended. And that's why the form will be so spontaneous, you can never predict how to join with someone. Whether you join with someone to teach them their metaphysics, or to point out something, or to just talk about the weather, or to have a good laugh, because that is not at the level of extension. The extension happens with the desire. And that is integration. The desire is integrated so much that you only want to extend the spirit's vision of a brother, everyone you meet and everywhere you go. And when that becomes so integrated, then that becomes the only goal when you see someone. How to meet, how to see you as a Christ. When you see the Christ, what would you feel? You feel so inspired and so joyful and so connected, so grateful. And the form will spring out however it is. It's a celebration. But purpose is underneath it. That's why I always feel this spiritual pathway is not a linear journey of, how far you've gone one day from the next, but it's how far you have transferred to all areas of your life. It's almost like a kind of circle kind of thing in my mind. It's like a sweep. Sometimes in the reader map, you sweep the whole circle. It's like the desire of seeing everything as the Christ, as everyone as the Christ. How far you have swept it. Is there any exceptions still left in the mind? And that is the so-called journey, the so-called process.
Yeah, look at these flowers behind us, and you go from a flower, from a bulb to a bloom, and from a bulb to a bloom is a burst. That's really what you want more than anything else, is you want the spirit to burst forth from you. This is not an intellectual course. This is not something that just to be studied over and over and over. Imagine Jesus, he's like working with you, and all that he wants is the burst. He just wants the burst and the bloom. He's not interested in, you don't get a resume, like I studied the course for 20 years, and I've written these books on the course, and I've done these workshops, etc. Jesus isn't interested, he's just interested in the burst. All he wants is that burst of love in your heart. Even with Helen Schuckman, she had a lot of resistance, and took her 7 years to take the course down. Because of a lot of resistance, we learned that she had misused her scribal ability seemingly in another lifetime. So she had tremendous resistance to this assignment because of her misuse as a priestess in a previous lifetime with the same ability. But at the end of her life, basically, she was like, almost like, I did it, I made it, I did it. Like, she was almost like proud that she had gone the distance and delivered the course. It was like delivering a child. I did it. And Jesus said, no, it was never about the course. Jesus said, he said, I love you. The burst. He's not interested in the book, because he tells us words are symbols of symbols twice removed from reality. He says this course is a beginning, not an end. The whole thing is aimed at the burst, going from the bulb to the bloom to the burst. He wants you to burst open in love, because you deserve it, because it's who you are, because you're worthy of it. And we are having those experiences in our community. There's just lots of people having burst and burst. Sometimes now the bursts are happening so strong that people, I was getting ready to go. Kirsten was having so many bursty moments that her body, she started to not be able to function with her body right before a tour. And they said, I'll come along. The Mystic will make a cameo appearance on the I Married a Mystic tour, which is the book that she's written. And then I was ready to, Francis was going to take me to the airport to fly out there and go out with Jeffrey and Kirsten. And then in the middle of the night I got a text from Francis, I may not be able to take you to the airport. She's gone into a burst. She tried to cut an apple and she couldn't, and she tried to cut a lemon and she couldn't. She went so into the burst that the body couldn't function. Jesus wants you to have the burst. That's the whole point. The Christ vision is everything, and everything else is peanuts. It's the preliminaries. Francis and I said, come on with me, let's go see this movie. We went to see 8 Days a Week, the Beatles movie. Francis was sitting in my left, and as the movie came on, Francis burst out crying. The tears came flooding down as she started watching the Beatles. She was raised in Beijing, in communist China, as an atheist, and she had not experienced the Beatles. And she's sitting there bursting, and the Beatles burst on the scene. You know, they're showing the Beatles bursting on the scene, singing love songs. The girls going up screaming as they're just singing one love song after another. Like, oh my God. It's one thing to have Elvis get up there and wiggle, but to have four guys, and you see their faces, and they're in sync, and the love songs are just bursting from them. And then the next one bursts, and the people, most of the girls scream hysterically. The Beatles, Jesus is using the Beatles. It was such a burst of light on this planet that it just went out of control. They were going all over. There was people getting trampled, and mobs, and cars getting smashed, windows getting smashed. The world had seen nothing like it. And even police officers, it's some kind of phenomenon. One of the guys in there was a radio announcer or whatever, and he was invited by the Beatles to go along with them, and his dad was warning him that it was dangerous to go with the Beatles. And then when he went with the Beatles, he was thinking, my God, this is dangerous. It's dangerous. Because there was a burst. There was a burst of love. Singing love songs openly, even simple, basic songs. I want to hold your hand. Hey, you got that something, da-da-da-da-da, I think you understand. I feel that something. I want to hold your hand. Help. John Lennon wrote help because he was going through struggles in his own life. Help, I need somebody. Help. It could be anybody. Just not anybody. Help. That song, I watched the crowd when they started singing help, people screamed, ah! It's an expression session. My God! This planet's needed a major expression session, and the Beatles are doing it. Screaming, singing the song help. Which he says, I wrote that from my heart. He said, I needed help. That's why I wrote help, is I needed help. And all these love songs, one after the next. Well, Frances cried and cried and cried, was grabbing quickly to her purse to try to pull out as many Kleenexes as she could get out of there as the streams were coming down. And that's what we're talking about. At some point in your journey, what we'll call it the spiritual journey, you do realize that so I'm watching all these flowers now as I'm speaking, that this is what it's all about. You are here for one reason, to burst in love. And you have to let go of judging how that looks. If the Beatles had judged how it looks, they would have stopped right away. As soon as they started to perform concerts over there in England, and there was traffic jams and broken glass and things like this, and people writing articles in the newspapers and magazines, it's like a rebellion. It must be stopped. Oh, it wasn't. It was just starting. It was no rebellion. It was a burst of love, like a bright comet blazing through a night sky, like nothing the world had ever seen. And we can't minimalize that. We have to know that Jesus was behind the Beatles. And there was a lot of repression and denial and stuffing things down. And when the Beatles came and openly started singing love songs, of course the young people screamed, like, hallelujah. And then when the society and the establishment tried to squelch them, even when they would show up at press conferences, and all of the teenagers are watching on like, okay, how are our heroes going to handle the press and the establishment and everything? They handled it with, for the most part, lightness, bold. They were bold. They did not back down from questions, and throughout their years, questions around the Vietnam War, questions around drugs. The only storm where the ego tried to really drag them down was when John Lennon said to a reporter he was talking to, he said, "We're bigger than Jesus Christ." And he was talking about the phenomenon. They were. If Jesus Christ maybe had lived in this time frame, he might have got more publicity than them, but they didn't have paparazzi, and Jesus wasn't out there with haircuts, little haircuts and guitars and singing. If Jesus had been singing his love songs, you bet back in those days, Herod and Pilate, they'd had a hell of a time trying to handle him, flying around in jet planes and girls screaming and knocking things over and everything. They did. Pilate and the Sadducees would have had a plenty to handle. But so Jesus, he was just responding that they were bigger in terms of their publicity than Jesus Christ. It was just ripping across the world, and nobody had ever seen a phenomenon like that. And that got taken out of context, and then they started, in America particularly, burning Beatles albums, and everybody bring your Beatles albums, and making heaps of piles and burning them, and refusal to play them on radio stations and everything. It just got spun out, and then John had to come out and say, "Listen, that's not what I'm talking about. He talked about the person of Jesus Christ. He liked the person of Jesus Christ. He wasn't putting down Jesus Christ. But that was the only time where the ego tried to really drag him down. But they handled it, They handled that even. They handled it really well and went on. Now this is what you're meant to do with your lifetime with the Course in Miracles, or whatever pathway you're using, is to go for the burst. Don't simply think, oh, I will try to make a living off of this course, because Jesus doesn't really ultimately want you to make a living off of it. Turn it into a career, water it down, turn it into just another thing. Go corporate Course in Miracles. Jesus is not interested in corporate Course in Miracles. He'd be like shaking his head, oh please, go for the burst. Somebody tell him, go for the burst. Somebody tell him, don't sell yourself short of anything short of that full-blown burst. And really, who cares how it looks? Who cares if you have to cry? Who cares if you have to emote? You don't think that the flowers are going to hold back from blooming. Even in cold weather conditions and storms and whatever, they're going to bloom. Sometimes you see these plants growing in these conditions where you think, how can anything even grow? And those blades of grass are pushing through the concrete or blooming here and there. Be a bloomer. Go for it. That's, if you could get one thing from this whole week, if you got only one thing, it would be go for it. Go for the love. Go for the burst. Because it's really what it's all about. If the world's an illusion and you aren't convinced of that yet, what is the one thing that will convince you of the reality of love except the burst of love for yourself? Fall deeply into love. Go with complete abandonment into love. Don't go with caution. I don't know, this love stuff, too lovey-dovey. People reacted to the Beatles in many different ways, but they wouldn't have kept up with it if they didn't feel it in their hearts. They kept writing. It was prolific how many love songs that they wrote.
And it changes. It never, their managers and the ones who published or produced their album, after massive success, and then all of a sudden watch them change their style, they got scared because this new style is not something that they perceive would be popular. And Beatles, they were so inspiring because they could never turn to anyone to check, is this okay? There's no precedent of what they did. And this is what we can give ourselves permission. We don't need to check with the external world, is this okay? Jesus, Holy Spirit is sponsoring our burst, and we go with that feeling of inspiration. We don't need to confirm, get reassurance from, yes, that's the right path, no, that's not, this is the right behavior, that is not. No, that's not our reference point. We need to set precedent. We're the one who set the precedent. We are the light of the world. We're leading the way. We're not following the way. We're following the Spirit. We're following the Spirit in our heart. And we give ourselves full permission, however it looks.
And the invitations will come. That's what I've noticed. When I just gave myself over to the burst, when I felt joy, when I felt glee, when I felt happy, then you don't really, your eyes aren't gazing out to see if anybody else is bursting. You're too busy bursting to be concerned if anybody else is bursting, And maybe at the beginning, like with St. Francis, when St. Francis was bursting, it wasn't the rich people of Assisi that were drawn to him. It wasn't the church. The church was like, yipes, what is this going on here? It was the lepers. It was the ones who were handicapped, who were dysfunctional, who were poor, who were cast out by society. They saw the sparkle in St. Francis's eyes. And the animals were drawn to St. Francis. It was the animals and the castaways that were drawn to him. And so, think of that. If that's what happened to St. Francis, if you start to really burst, and friends, relatives, people around you start to go, they've lost it. They've gone Looney Tunes. They've completely... Have you seen how happy they are? It's disgusting. They're just, if you start to get comments like that, you're in good company. St. Francis was cast out, his family. He left Assisi to go out and rebuild San Damiano, the church. He went out to a torn down church with people that followed him, that were the outcasts of society, and the animals, basically. That's the ones that could handle his burst. That's who could handle his joy. And it's good for all of us, because we shouldn't be looking left and right to see how is this working with the people in our lives. There may be some people in your lives that will go, whoa, I don't know what it is, but you got some kind of vibe going there, and I want to hear more about it. Maybe just a handful of people, and then a bunch of people may go, wacko. They are wacko. They've gone way off the deep end. I don't know what they're into now, but it's dangerous. It's dangerous. They're too happy. They're delirious. They must be on drugs or something. And if you go for it, in the end, that will be the only thing that matters. Because remember, it's one mind. And so if you go into the burst, you experience that one mind. You don't need to try to fit that into something from the past. Jesus said, you can't put new wine into old wineskins. If you put new wine into old wineskins, the skins will burst. It's that he's interested in the new wine. He's interested in the newness. And if old structures start to burst and fall away, hallelujah, let them fall away. Let them peel off. You don't have to go back. Like in the Bible with Lot's wife, they told her, just keep moving forward. Don't look back, or you'll turn into a pillar of salt. I remember watching the Ten Commandments and that scene where she doesn't listen and she turns, and then it's like this salt woman. She turns into salt woman. It's like a Marvel comic character, salt woman. It just was like one turn, and then she was salt. All salt. She froze. It was a very strong metaphor. I've never forgot that. That was a striking image when I was a child watching that movie. She froze. When we stick to habits and old learnings and rituals and trying to please people and pleasing parents and pleasing society and everything, we freeze our consciousness into something that's solid. It's not fluid, it's not spontaneous, like I was talking about with Maslow. It's not flexible. We are frozen. Our bulb will not open. It will just stay as a tight bulb. And none of us we're worth so much more than just a tight bulb that's all tight wound in there. We are destined to burst. We are destined to burst. So I don't know what time it is, but we've got time to open it up. And we've got Peter's got the microphone.
I was just going to say, it's funny the way you were saying that. Like, I think a few years ago, you came to visit in Sydney, and I was helping with the event, but I sent it out to some of my old friends, and it had the banner and some pictures of you, and they sort of, a couple of them said, "Oh no, I'm not really interested." But one of my friends said, I sort of said, "Oh, what do you think?" And he was like, "Nah, too much happiness." Like, as he looked at the photos. And I was like, okay, that's... I thought it was a funny comment, because that's what I really enjoyed about, the joining with you and the messengers and the whole event. But, it's like he just knew that wasn't what he wanted, but I just thought it was quite funny. But I haven't seen them for a while, so, things change, yeah.
Hi, thank you very much. At the end of last evening, I heard a lot of people saying that your comment about cause and effect happening simultaneously was a massive pop and burst, and I just heard it in different conversations in the various rooms. It came quite late after a long day and a very impactful movie, and I personally, and I'm sure there'd be many people would be grateful if you could just talk to that a little bit more today. Thanks.
Yeah, that was kind of the result. When I kept studying the Course in the early years and going deeper and deeper, I felt like I was going down, almost like Alice in Wonderland, down through the looking glass, like I was just spinning down and down and down. It felt like I was going down, and Jesus had taken my hand, and he was just taking me, zooming way beyond anything that I had ever known or experienced, and I was like holding on for dear life, going down through the looking glass. And what happened is when we got down to the bottom of the looking glass, it was all the stuff on cause and effect. And so I was doing, back in the 1990s, I remembered I did a session reversing cause and effect, and I started the Spirit. Jesus was speaking all these teachings around cause and effect. And throughout the years, all the different Course teachers that have come, there have been a few, like Ken touched on it, but I've never heard anything like what Jesus was speaking through me in those early 1990s. I was taken down the rabbit hole into this glory, and he was just teaching. It's simultaneous, it's cause and effect are together, and explaining it all. So I did this session. It was very deep, and it's still on the internet, I think. It maybe has shown up in a book of mine. But what happened was I had a group of students, and one of my friends, Jeffrey Lake, decided he wanted to listen to the talk. I don't know, maybe it was like a couple-hour talk, and he wanted to listen to it. He thought, I'm just going to listen to this so I can really get the gist of what he's talking about. And he listened to it, and then he said, I better listen again. And then the second time, then the third time, fourth time, and he thought, I want to transcribe this, but I need to just get the essence of it. So fifth time, sixth time, he told me he had to listen to it 7 times, the same talk, because it was so heavily guarded. Like the ego doesn't want you to even go there. Like if you start to get near that, then you start to get too happy, and you start to realize, oh my God, there's nothing that can stop me and hold me back. So he took him 7 times, and then he started transcribing it and so forth. But basically, there are certain things that the ego just doesn't want to be brought to awareness, because if it gets into awareness, then you start to laugh, because you start to think, like Shakespeare, that it's much ado about nothing. It doesn't matter what it is. It could be the most extreme thing imaginable on earth, and suddenly it starts to get funnier and funnier and funnier. And I have known people that have just laughed hysterically. I came to Sydney, I met this woman, Asira, who was called the Laughing Saint. We had a wonderful time together just gazing into each other's eyes, me and the Laughing Saint. And because it's an experience. But what it does is it loosens you up from this kind of heavy feeling that you're here on planet Earth to serve your lot, to try to survive and make it through. Almost like it's an obstacle course of extreme difficulty, and you've got to do your best to make it through, and then you die. It's really it's bizarre. I mean, I remember when I was in university. I was in the University of Cincinnati, and I was in graduate school, and I remember I was talking to all these other graduate assistants and everything. And I kept saying, the Spirit already then started to just speak through me in graduate school with my friends, and they would say, David, what are you on about now? Oh my gosh. And I would talk for 5 or 10 minutes, and they would roll their eyes, and then we'd come back together, I'd talk some more, they'd roll their eyes. They'd say, what are you on about? And I said, I think there's something fishy about the world. And they would say, what? What do you mean? And I said, something's not right. But I would ponder on what it was, and I would be very excited. I would talk about it. And then finally, after they would roll their eyes, and after 3 or 4 times through, they would just say, get a life. Get a life. And I said, what is a life? And they said, get married, get children, get a mortgage, get into debt, and then grow old and eat, drink, and be merry, and then you get sick and die like everybody else, and the billions and trillions that have gone before you. They would come at me because I was talking all this stuff, and they couldn't handle it really. And I would say, if that's a life, I don't want a life. I'm not interested in the future. I'm not interested in any of that. And they would say, oh God, their eyes would roll like, oh now what? But I think already I was just in the early stages of preparing to get into this deeper quantum stuff, to cause and effect and non-dual, all this. I was just kind of at the point where I couldn't imagine what I saw in this world for my future. I thought, oh my God, I might as well just get it over with now. It seemed unbearable. I couldn't even imagine going through that kind of life, and I think I was just excited. So then, all those years of shyness, really there was a lot of introspection. I did read Gandhi's autobiography too, and he was very contemplative and very shy also, and very introspective. And I think I was just pondering, because I was pondering, I don't want to go on the wheel of the human life until I really have a sense of what's it all for. I have to know what it's all for first, before I put that much effort. I saw people burning out, so much people burning out with not knowing, just kind of stepping into the wheel and getting sucked up into the machine, and I thought, I can't do that. So the cause-effect stuff, it's just grown stronger over the years. I have a book called Quantum Forgiveness, Physics, Meet Jesus, and it's really taking the realm of physics and quantum physics and bringing it together with A Course in Miracles, Jesus and his teachings, movies, everything that seems to be pouring through now is tied into this cause and effect being simultaneous. Even this feeling that Jesus is laughing behind everything that I see, Jesus, I just feel Jesus laughing. And everything that's happening in my experience is so light and playful. I just feel like Jesus is having so much fun, and now I'm tapped into that vibe, and it's because of simultaneity. It's because everything is simultaneous. That linear time has become the joke. I don't even have to go see comedians now or stand-up comedians. Everything is funny to me. You know, some people tell me something from the internet or whatever, and I just burst in laughing. I'm laughing a lot because of the simultaneity. Because, you know.
Can I ask you something while you're on this?
Yeah.
In that moment where God was before everything,
And then there was that simultaneous moment where he had the idea maybe of the earth, I'm not sure, or world or creation as we know it. And then the Holy Spirit is what was the... I'm just trying to... I've kind of got a little bit around that, but if you could just help me get some clarity maybe. And I understand about, you know, the consciousness of God before everything, you know, no beginning and no end, and that I can understand that. Then there was a moment when a choice was made for creation perhaps, and there may be multiple creations, there probably are. And then there was the correction of that thought perhaps, or something that needed to be intercepted when that happened, and that's what the Holy Spirit is, and that's something we have access to. But there's still something not quite, it hasn't quite come together for me, if I'm not articulating it very well. But if you could just talk to that a little bit, given that you're talking about something happening simultaneously, that's probably the most profound simultaneous event, maybe ever.
Yeah, that's the most important thing.
Thank you.
With the belief in separation from God, that the answer was given simultaneously, so that means that there, in effect, never was a problem, that the answer was given simultaneously with the problem. And I was talking yesterday about how Einstein said you can't solve a problem from the level of the problem. It's this answer that was given, the Holy Spirit, is everything. In that moment, that simultaneous answer is everything. Now the acceptance of that answer is what seems to take time. The mind is so terrified of that thought of separation that it's built layers of defenses. You might have seen the movie Inception. There's like layers of dreaming. So many layers that the mind actually forgets that it's dreaming. And now it's taken everything in the physical linear world as serious and real and actually happening. You know, it's so much forgotten. It's so much had an amnesia about the separation, about the light, and about the dreaming as well. So I think for me what that means is that you can go for this answer, this atonement, and progressively you start to see that it's the only thing that's important. The atonement, accepting the atonement, Jesus says 2 different places in the Course, is the sole responsibility of the miracle worker, and then he says it's the sole responsibility of the teacher of God. Really what he's saying is nothing else is important. Absolutely nothing of this world has any importance except for that answer. And that answer is covered, it's buried. So in one sense you're on a treasure hunt. It's kind of fun. It's like, ooh, I'm on an adventure. At one workbook lesson, Jesus says, he's describing the mind, all these thoughts, and he says, among all the thoughts in your mind, salvation is among them. And then he says, find it. Ooh. That's cool. That's what to do with a life. Salvation, the answer is among all these thoughts in your mind. Find it. It's kind of fun. It's like a childhood game, hide and seek. It's hidden. Now we get to go seek it. like games we would play as children. Ooh, this is a game, but this is an important game because salvation or freedom, true freedom, depends on finding the answer. And so it's basically out of desire. If you desire to find that answer, then you're going to zoom in to that. Like all of our great movies, like remember the first Star Wars movie, and then we watched the Star Wars series. I remember watching the Star Wars movies, and then there was that one where, Luke Skywalker has got to go into the Death Star, and it's this massive dark construct, and he's got to fly his little aircraft down, and he's got to go all the way to the center of the Death Star, and he's got to knock out the power of the Death Star. I think this is perfect. This is A Course in Miracles. Even if you never learned A Course in Miracles and you watch Star Wars, you've got to get to the Death Star. You've got to get inside. You've got to knock it out. And the closer he gets to knocking the power out, finally it's Obi-Wan Kenobi comes into his mind, and is basically telling him, don't use your instrument panel is not going to help you. Use the Force, Luke. There it is again. Death Star, you need a direct hit on the power plant of the Death Star, and you can't use your five senses to get there. Obi-Wan Kenobi is the voice of the Holy Spirit saying, use the Force, use the Force. That's what we have to all do. The Course is just helping us get in touch with the Force. And then we have to use the Force. What do we use the Force for? For everything. We have to let the Force guide our exercise, our nutrition, our eating habits, what we say, what we do, where we go, who we meet, what to invest in, what to divest from. We want to use the Force for absolutely everything. And that's really how you go for it. And the whole point is going for the answer. You're going for an experience. You're going for the burst with everything that you've got. And you're throwing caution to the wind. We've all lived life of caution. We're so cautious. We don't want to make a false move. We think, I could really go off the beam and have a terrible life. Look at how they turned out. Look at them over there. Oh, they're homeless over there. My God. We're so very cautious that we don't allow the burst. And the burst is the answer. So, to me, all of this kind of comes to a place of listen and follow, of give yourself fully over, of saying, I am going to have a life that is beyond what I could even imagine. I have said too that if as a child, if somebody had showed me the way my life had played out, in this world, I would have been scared. I either would have been so scared and in such denial and saying, you got the wrong one, that will never happen. Or I would have just been thought, that just can't be, that's not even possible. I don't even know what that means. But the way that it's played out has been an unimaginable life of going for the burst and not looking to things of the world as, like Francis was saying, as like a gauge or a comparison. I couldn't look to Course in Miracles teachers in going to this, because I thought, Jesus is calling me out of the world, and I can't take this halfway. I can't try to find a middle ground with this. I can't try to incorporate the Course into my earthly life when the whole teachings of the Course is you can't bring the truth into the illusions. You have to bring all of your illusions to the truth. To me, that's been essential to stay true to that in order for there to be the burst. And now it's just a delightful experience. I don't feel it in terms of A Course in Miracles. I mean, people may invite us in that regard still, but like when we first went to China, I think most of the people that showed up came from word of mouth. They weren't Course in Miracles students. It just started showing up in droves. We had 100 people there, and only a small fraction of that were Course in Miracles students. The word of mouth just spread. There were flowers at the airport, two airports. They showed up with bouquets of flowers. And I thought, wow, that's amazing, that's spectacular. But that's because of presence. That's because of the burst. It's not, because of some kind of theology or system, thought system or whatever. Thank you. Yourself.
I just wanted to share the cause and effect, a precious sort of moment that was shared with me. A friend of mine was on duty in a nursing home and had non-English speaking staff, and nobody understood what to do in this place, and it was chaos, and she felt she didn't have any control over the situation. They had so much work to do before 8 o'clock, and anyway, her lesson, she was living in a tent on the beach, and she did her lesson in the morning. It was 61, I am the light of the world. And as she got on, and all these her staff were milling around waiting for instructions, and there was such chaos, she just started saying, I'm the light of the world, I'm the light of the world, I'm the light of the world. And these people, non-English speaking, all started saying, I am the light of the world. Didn't know what they were talking about or anything, had no idea. But all of a sudden, all the washes, the contents, the whole sort of thing was ordered, and everybody got to breakfast on time. And the beaming faces on both patients and on staff, Chris said, was the most amazing thing. So cause and effect. Thank you.
Ah, what a story. Immediate results. I am the light of the world. Like a chant almost. Everybody joined in. Oh, spectacular. Yeah. Anybody else have anything to share? Yes, over here.
Yes, when we talked about idea of thought of separation, tiny mad idea. So in my mind, I'm wondering why in the kingdom of heaven would we even have that idea? What allowance is there for such thoughts to happen? Even if it did happen in our imagination. So I thought maybe it's like because God allows anything, so maybe there's allowance for even a tiny mad idea, because God doesn't disallow anything, So then I was thinking, okay, if God allows any idea to come, so we might have thought this idea, like Jesus said, tiny mad idea, or someone said, a friend of mine said, she remembered the original separation. It was like someone saying, oh, let's go get some ice cream, and some others were saying, oh yeah, let's go and get some ice cream, and then going like that. And then she said, then what she remembered was that she was falling, and then she was in a womb, and she forgot what happened in between. But she said, I remember taking part in the original separation. So add to that, there's another friend of mine, psychic friend, and from childhood, she was taken on astral travels, and she was shown different things. And one of the things was that she said, I saw the light, the source, creating light. And these light beings come, and they would create anything they want. Mountains, the lakes, and they would rest. And then after resting, they would just with one sweep, everything disappears and they go back to light. Then I thought, okay, maybe that's the freedom we have to create whatever we want. And then as long as we go home by 9 p.m., God is happy. But in this case, we seem to have kept on going, creating and creating. Somehow we got lost in the plot or something, lost in the jungle in our imagination, So, and then I think, what is the purpose? Is it maybe just a fun, have fun, and God allows it, and we keep creating. And like Eckhart Tolle is saying, there are two schools of thought in that. Some say that we have to feel the separation in order to feel the oneness. Even one ACIM teacher also says that we have never been awake. We were in the state of like a source where everything is still. There's no creation as such. So we are kind of not awake, but we experience this separation in order to be co-creators with God. So I see that as two schools of thought there, whether it's we have been co-created with God and then started dreaming this dream, and we are, you know what I'm saying? There are two schools of thought.
It's good to go into it, because anything that says that there's something other than love, there's love and something other than love, is dualistic.
Right.
And a non-dualistic path is teaching nothing real can be threatened, nothing unreal exists. Herein lies the peace of God. So, to use it in terms of simultaneous, really what atonement is, which is what the burst is, which is what the answer is the awareness that the separation never happened. In other words, the question of how did it happen or why did it happen is the ego just spinning its wheels. There is no separation. In fact, you might say that the book is written as if, and Jesus does put that in the clarification of terms. He says the mind is described as if, and he puts as if, which is our hypotheticals, in italics. So the whole book is written as if the impossible occurred. For a mind that believes that this impossible has occurred. Jesus says in the clarification of terms, the ego will ask many questions that this course has no answer for. How did the separation occur? To whom did the separation occur? And many other forms. This course has no answer conceptually for the ego's questions. Because again, atonement, which is what I'm calling the burst, is the awareness that the separation has never occurred. Hallelujah, rejoice. Rejoice in love. Love has no opposite. That's the beauty of it. Let's look at it in terms of cause and effect. I was joking last night I was saying, remember when I started talking about the gap? Mind the gap. If you're over in England, you take the tube, you hear the mind the gap, mind the gap, mind the gap. The gap between cause and effect is the belief in separation. But what did I say? That there is no gap between cause and effect. Isn't that wonderful? That's the experience, that's the burst. Nothing needs to be corrected. Jesus says this is not a course in the philosophical play of ideas. Philosophy falls short of the burst. Theology falls short of the burst. And thank God, none of us are called to be theologians or scholars. We're not called to be metaphysicians even. We're called to burst. It's really that simple. And then in that, all questions fall away. So it becomes a living experience. I remember, I tell people one time I was sitting at a place, I think it was getting some tires, for the car, and I was sitting at this used tire store, kind of a really run-down place and everything, and I was sitting there, and this woman next to me, she comes up and she sits down next to me, and she's got this biggest smile on her face, and she's smiling, and we're sitting there in the sunshine at this used tire place, and she turns over to me and she looks at me, and she starts off with what many people consider to be a loaded question, a really loaded question. She turns to me and she says, "Do you know the name of God?" Do you know the name of God? Well, I was just so happy, and I just smiled back at her and I said, "Tell me." You see, this is how Jesus works. Tell me. And I forget what she said, Jehovah or whatever it was, Yahweh or whatever, I can't remember. Who cares? I mean, really, that's what I say is, who cares? I'm not interested in that. I'm interested in love. So I said, tell me. And we had the most fun. When she said it, I just lit up. Whatever the name was, Yahweh, Jehovah, it could have been Fred or Louise, whatever. I would have lit up with any name. She could have told me that God was a pink pyramid. I would have went, because the love is what's important. It's not. I'm not going to split hairs with anybody over anything. And in those kind of questions too, in the end, actually Helen Schuckman, the scribe of the Course, and Bill Thetford, they actually asked that question of Jesus after they'd scribed and taken down so many chapters. They were like, Jesus, can we, before we go on, can we ask one tiny question? How did this happen in the first place? And it was interesting the way Jesus answered them. Here they are doing this Course in Miracles, and he said, well, he didn't answer it directly. He said, well, you can tell by your emotional roller coaster ride as human beings that you believe that it did. That's what he said. You believe it. And he was giving a course to show that it's impossible. Separation's impossible. He was giving a course to take you into the burst, into an experience, not into another theology, not into some kind of conceptual, philosophical answer that you can use in a debate or use in a public. No, he was saying, come join me in the burst. That's all that matters. The burst is all that matters. And there aren't any conceptual answers for those things because the separation didn't happen. That's why when I told the story of Adam and Eve and all this and this, and then I said Jesus has a new version of Genesis, and it doesn't have any snakes in it, and no trees. Remember I was saying, no snakes, no trees, into eternity where all is one. There crept a tiny mad idea at which the Son of God remembered not to laugh, and then this guy Al started screaming, crept. And all his rage came out on that one word. Even Jesus' news story. People used to rage at the Bible story, like why would God do that, put such a tree in there? Now he's screaming at the crept word. Crept! He's screaming, crept! It's like, how? It's just a story. That's not true either. Jesus told another story. It just was a story to give a little bit of help. He took the naked bodies out. Come on, Al. He took the naked bodies out. He took the snake out. He took the tree out. And he's like, crept. I said, no, it never happened. That's we have to forgive the Course. He does say that at one point. He says, forget this world, forget this Course. He says in Lesson 189. He's actually saying, come into the burst and eventually forget the Course and forget all those questions that you ever had, because it never happened.
I just had a visual in my head when you were saying separation never happened. And the visual that popped into my head was we could be outside in the beautiful warm sunlight, bathed in the bright light, and the moment we close our eyes, just because we can't see it, we might have a tiny mad idea of belief that there is no sunlight. We're not in the light. All we have to do is open our eyes again.
That's beautiful. All we have to do is open our eyes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I have one question I'd like you to clarify. You said you always bring the illusion into the light, not the light into the illusion. Can you flesh that out or give a practical example?
It's just that all these concepts that we're emptying and we're letting go of, all these concepts are a false self-concept, and you can't bring truth or light into false concepts. You can simply see the false concept and give it back to the Holy Spirit. And we have to do that with all of them. So in the end, we talk about mother or daughter or son or father or Course in Miracles teacher or spiritual seeker or spiritual, it's all concepts that we just yield them all and say, no, show me, you show me, reveal to me who I am. That's what we mean by bringing the darkness to the light. And I really think at some point, I've done a movie watcher's guide to enlightenment, but I'm going to do a music lover's guide to enlightenment. For those who love music, the music lover's guide to enlightenment. And I will leave you this session with a line from a song that I really like. And the line goes, but in the time it takes us to go beyond the lies, we could be sailing through each other's eyes. I like that song. In the time it takes us to go beyond the lies, we could be sailing through each other's eyes. We could be bursting. We could be bursting instead. That's what this is about. It's the joy, it's the love, it's the happiness. It's giving ourselves permission to truly be happy and not to hold back. Not to hold back from that.
Yeah, we thought today is, almost like a day of giving yourself permission and giving yourself allowance. Just really have that in your mind. Anything that comes up, you're not the judger. Like you not be the judger of whatever that arises. Give it to the Spirit. So today we thought, after this morning session, we really want the rest of the day be very, very spontaneous and give you a lot of spaciousness to just integrate, because we're halfway into the retreat. We have many, many really deep sessions. Last night was just such a boom. So we want to give some spaciousness to allow the mind to integrate, allow yourself just to nurture you and just to tap into what feels most helpful. We thought this afternoon can be just an open afternoon, and you can pray on what is truly helpful. You want to take a walk, you want to join with someone, you want to just do something, have little music, rest, whatever that is helpful for this integration would be, what you can do. And we also, the messengers will be available if you feel somehow there are emotions that really needs to be allowed and need some kind of support. We are here to offer one-on-one sessions. So there's a whiteboard where you can jot your name on. I think you said we put some time on that. We start at 3.
3:30, 4.
Okay, yeah, that sounds good. So if you need that this afternoon, just take your time. But if you don't need that, just give yourself permission to do what you feel is most helpful. And tonight we'll come back at 6:30, and in this room, we're gonna just guide everybody into some experiential session to really tap into some giving and receiving.
Beautiful. Thank you. What a lovely morning. What a lovely morning.